Don't start that dramatic black woman routine in my lobby. Labor or not, you're not getting through. Security guard Derek Mullally thrust his palm out in a rigid stop gesture inside the hospital lobby, his arm cutting the space between the ER doors, and Ariel Thompson, hunched to his right and clutching her stomach as another contraction seized her. "Every night, someone like you waddles in here screaming emergency," he scoffed. "You're not special. You wait like everybody else. If you can't stand, sit on the floor." Ariel's fingers dug into the wall rail as pain tore through her. Derek Mullally had no idea he was denying entry to the one woman whose husband could end his entire career with a single phone call. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Ariel Thompson jolted awake in her darkened bedroom, a sharp pain radiating across her abdomen. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed, 11:42 p.m., casting a soft red light against the walls. She sat up slowly, her hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly as another contraction gripped her body. "No, no, no," she whispered, trying to steady her breathing. "It's too early." She was only 34 weeks along, nowhere near her due date. The pain intensified, forcing her to grip the edge of the mattress. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she reached for her phone with trembling fingers. She pressed Jordan's contact, listening to the ring's echo in her ear. "Hi, you've reached Mayor Jordan Thompson. Please leave a message." Ariel ended the call, remembering he was giving an important speech across town at the community center's annual fundraiser. She tried again, but it went straight to voicemail. The silence of the empty house pressed in around her as another contraction hit, stronger than the last. "Okay, baby," she murmured, slowly pushing herself to her feet. "We can't wait for Daddy." She grabbed her pre-packed hospital bag from the closet, moving carefully down the hallway while keeping one hand against the wall for support. In the kitchen, Ariel snatched her keys from the hook by the door, pausing to breathe through another wave of pain. The contractions were getting closer together, too close for comfort. She knew the drive to Metropolitan Hospital would take 15 minutes in normal traffic, but the late hour might work in her favor. The night air felt cool against her skin as she made her way to her car, each step measured and deliberate. Inside the vehicle, she adjusted the seat back as far as it would go to accommodate her belly, then turned the key in the ignition. The engine's purr seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet neighborhood. Ariel pulled out of her driveway, gripping the steering wheel tightly as she navigated the empty streets. Streetlights cast alternating patterns of light and shadow across her dashboard. Another contraction forced her to pull over briefly, her knuckles white as she waited for it to pass. "Just breathe," she coached herself, using the techniques she'd learned in birthing class. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The city seemed eerily deserted, with only the occasional car passing by. Each red light felt like an eternity as Ariel waited, watching the seconds tick by on her car's digital clock. She tried Jordan's phone twice more at stoplights, but still no answer. Finally, the hospital's illuminated sign came into view. Ariel felt a momentary surge of relief as she turned into the parking lot, finding a spot close to the emergency entrance. She gathered her bag and phone, taking a moment to compose herself before stepping out of the car. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, revealing the stark white interior of the hospital lobby. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everything appear harsh and clinical. The front desk stood about 30 feet ahead, staffed by a nurse who was looking down at some paperwork. Ariel took a few steps forward, another contraction building. She could feel beads of sweat rolling down her back as she tried to maintain her composure. The sound of her footsteps echoed off the polished floor tiles. Before she could reach the desk, movement to her left caught her attention. A security guard stepped out from behind his station, deliberately positioning himself between Ariel and her destination. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a clean-pressed uniform and a badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The guard's face hardened as he gave her a dismissive once-over, his eyes lingering on her expensive maternity dress before moving to her face. His expression shifted from suspicious to cold, his jaw setting in a rigid line. He planted his feet firmly, making it clear he had no intention of letting her pass. Ariel felt her heart rate spike as another contraction began. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain her situation, but the guard's stern expression and confrontational stance made the words die in her throat. The harsh overhead lights cast deep shadows across his face, emphasizing the disdain in his features as he stared down at her. Standing there under the unforgiving hospital lights, with pain radiating through her body and fear clouding her thoughts, Ariel suddenly felt very alone. The guard's cold, dismissive demeanor spoke volumes before he'd even said a word, and she knew with crushing certainty that this was going to be a fight, one she shouldn't have to face while in labor. Security guard Mullally's stance widened as he planted himself more firmly between Ariel and the emergency room entrance. His hand rested casually on his utility belt, but there was nothing casual about his expression. "Ma'am, the main entrance is on the other side of the building. This is the emergency department. You can't just walk in here demanding attention." Ariel tried to keep her voice steady, despite the growing pressure in her abdomen. "I need emergency care. I'm in labor and something's wrong. It's too early." Mullally's eyes narrowed as he gave her another dismissive look. "You look perfectly fine to me. We have actual emergencies here, real patients who need immediate care." He gestured toward the main entrance. "Registration is that way. You'll need to follow proper procedures like everyone else." A contraction hit suddenly, forcing Ariel to grab the nearest wall for support. Her breath came in short gasps as she tried to ride out the wave of pain. "Please," she managed to say between breaths, "my baby." "Listen," Mullally cut her off, taking a step closer. "People like you always come in here acting like you deserve better treatment than everyone else." The words "people like you" hung in the air, their meaning unmistakable. Ariel felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of shame and anger. Even as another contraction began building, she straightened up as much as she could, trying to maintain her dignity. "I'm not asking for special treatment," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm in active labor at 34 weeks. Please just let me through to the ER." Mullally scoffed, shaking his head. "Right, and I suppose you think you can just bypass all our protocols. There are patients in there who've been waiting their turn." He took another step forward, using his height to intimidate. "You need to go to the main entrance and check in properly." Ariel could feel tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I can't. I can barely walk. The contractions are too close together." "Ma'am," Mullally's voice took on a patronizing tone, "if you really were in that much distress, you wouldn't be able to argue with me right now. I've seen plenty of people try to game the system." Another contraction ripped through her body, stronger than the last. Ariel's knees buckled slightly as she clutched her stomach. "Please," she gasped, "something's wrong. I need help now." Mullally remained unmoved, watching her struggle with cold detachment. "The rules are the rules. You're disturbing other patients who actually need emergency care." He emphasized the word "actually" with obvious skepticism. "I am having an emergency." Ariel's voice rose slightly with desperation, causing him to step even closer. "Lower your voice," he warned. "This is a hospital, not a marketplace. You can't make a scene here just because you don't want to follow proper procedures." Sweat dripped down Ariel's back as she tried to steady herself against the wall. The fluorescent lights seemed to grow brighter, making her dizzy. Through the glass doors behind him, she could see nurses moving about, help so close, yet completely out of reach. "I'm begging you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My baby could be in danger. Please just let me see a doctor." Mullally crossed his arms across his chest, his badge catching the harsh overhead light. "And I'm telling you to go to the main entrance. If you really need medical attention, you can get it there, after you check in properly." The pain was becoming unbearable now. Ariel could feel her legs starting to shake as another contraction built. She tried to take a step forward, hoping to somehow make it past him to the ER doors, but he immediately shifted to block her path completely. "Don't even think about it," he warned, his voice hard. "I'm not letting you barge in there and disturb the real emergencies." Ariel's vision began to blur as the contraction peaked. Her legs finally gave way, and she doubled over, one hand still braced against the wall while the other clutched her stomach. Through the roaring in her ears, she could see Mullally's polished shoes still planted firmly in front of her, his arms folded across his chest as a stance of absolute authority. He made no move to help her as she struggled to remain standing, his shadow falling across her like a physical barrier between her and the medical care she desperately needed. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the lobby as Ariel pressed her palm against the cold wall, desperate for support. Her whole body tensed as another contraction seized her, more intense than any before. The pain radiated from her lower back through her abdomen, stealing her breath. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she tried to breathe through it. The wall's smooth surface was the only thing keeping her upright as her legs trembled beneath her. Mullally continued to watch her with obvious disdain, his arms still folded across his chest. Suddenly, warmth rushed down her legs. She strode purposefully toward a row of wheelchairs lined against the wall, shooting Malloy a withering glare as she passed. He shifted uncomfortably, finally taking a few steps back from his blocking position. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the lobby as two more nurses and a doctor in a white coat hurried toward them. The doctor took one look at Ariel and immediately began barking orders. Get her into triage now. Why wasn't she admitted immediately? His stern gaze fell on Malloy, who seemed to shrink under the scrutiny. Nurse Mitchell returned with the wheelchair, and together with the other nurses, they carefully helped Ariel to her feet. Her legs barely supported her weight as they guided her into the chair. Malloy watched silently from the side, his earlier bravado completely deflated. I've got you, Nurse Mitchell murmured, squeezing Ariel's shoulder as she settled into the wheelchair. You're safe now. For the first time since entering the hospital, Ariel felt tears of relief rather than fear sliding down her cheeks. The crushing weight of helplessness began to lift as the medical team surrounded her with professional efficiency. The doctor held the ER doors open as they wheeled her through, leaving Malloy and his protocols behind in the lobby. The harsh fluorescent lighting gave way to softer illumination as they moved swiftly down the corridor. BP's elevated, one of the nurses called out, already taking Ariel's vitals as they moved. Pulse is rapid. No surprise there, Nurse Mitchell replied grimly, still pushing the wheelchair. How long were you in labor before coming in? She asked Ariel gently. Started a few hours ago, Ariel managed between controlled breaths. Getting worse fast. They turned down another hallway, passing through a set of double doors marked labor and delivery. The familiar hospital sense of disinfectant and sterile equipment filled the air. Here we go, Nurse Mitchell announced as they entered a triage room. Let's get you onto the bed. With practiced care, the medical team helped Ariel from the wheelchair. Her legs trembled as they supported her weight, guiding her to sit on the edge of the hospital bed. Another contraction gripped her just as they were helping her lie back. Breathe through it, Nurse Mitchell coached, holding her hand firmly. You're doing great. The other nurses moved with quick efficiency around her, one attaching monitor leads while another prepared an IV line. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed, making notes on a tablet as he observed. Getting a fetal heartbeat, announced one nurse, adjusting the monitor. The rapid whoosh, whoosh sound filled the room, bringing fresh tears to Ariel's eyes. Relief flooded through her as she lay back against the pillows, finally receiving the medical care she desperately needed. The immediate terror of being denied help began to fade, replaced by the normal fears of impending delivery. Nurse Mitchell stayed by her side, her presence steady and reassuring as the team continued their assessments. The horror of the lobby confrontation still lingered, but for now, Ariel could focus on what mattered most, safely delivering her baby. The steady beep of monitors filled the triage room as Ariel lay back against the thin hospital pillows, her body still trembling from the earlier ordeal. The immediate crisis had passed, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her limbs. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the medical equipment surrounding her bed. Through the thin curtain barrier, movement and hushed voices caught her attention. Ariel recognized Malloy's deep voice, now taking on an official tone that made her stomach clench with anxiety. She became immediately hostile when I attempted to direct her to proper admissions, he was saying, refused to follow basic protocols, and began causing a disturbance in the lobby. Ariel's hands gripped the scratchy hospital blanket. Every word he spoke twisted the truth of what had happened, painting a completely different picture than the terrifying reality she had endured. Subject was yelling, making threats, and attempted to force her way through security measures, he continued. I maintained professional composure while she displayed increasingly aggressive behavior. A rush of dizziness washed over her as she listened to the lies. The monitor beside her bed registered her quickening pulse with more frequent beeps. How could he stand there and completely fabricate events that had happened less than an hour ago? Had to call for backup due to her confrontational attitude, Malloy added. She was deliberately ignoring instructions and creating a scene that disturbed other patients. Other voices joined in, speaking in low tones that barely carried through the curtain. Ariel strained to hear, her heart pounding harder with each snippet that reached her ears. Always the same with them, one voice muttered, coming in here acting entitled. Mm-hmm, another voice agreed. Some black women just think they deserve special treatment. Probably trying to jump the line ahead of real emergencies, a third voice added. Tears burned in Ariel's eyes as the weight of their words pressed down on her chest. The prejudice in their casual conversation was like a physical blow. She had nearly collapsed in that lobby, her water broken, in desperate need of medical care. And now they were painting her as an angry, entitled woman making unreasonable demands. The monitor's beeping increased again as panic started to set in. These weren't just cruel words. This false narrative could have serious consequences. How would it affect her ongoing care? What if there were complications? Would staff take her concerns seriously, or would they view everything through the lens of this fabricated report? More importantly, what would happen to other women who came after her? If Malloy's lies were accepted as truth, they would only reinforce the prejudices that had nearly cost her and her baby's safety tonight. The voices moved further down the hall, but their impact remained heavy and suffocating in this small triage room. Ariel's hands shook as she reached for her phone on the bedside table. She needed Jordan, needed his strength, his advocacy, his unwavering support. A young nurse entered, different from Nurse Mitchell, who had helped her earlier. This one barely made eye contact as she moved to check the IV line. Her movements efficient, but cool. She wondered if she had been part of the group outside, if she too now saw her as just another entitled patient causing problems. The nurse adjusted the drip rate with quick, practiced movements. Try to rest, she said flatly, still not meeting Ariel's eyes. Doctor will begin to check you soon. Ariel nodded silently, not trusting her voice, as the nurse left, closing the curtain behind her with a metallic scraping sound. Ariel's trembling fingers found Jordan's number in her phone. The screen blurred through her tears as she pressed dial. Each ring seemed to echo Malloy's lies, the staff's whispers, the weight of prejudice that had nearly prevented her from reaching help. She needed to tell Jordan everything, not just about the guard's actions, but about how he was now trying to cover it up, how the staff were already accepting his version of events without questioning. The IV needle shifted uncomfortably in her arm as she held the phone, waiting for Jordan to answer. Outside her curtained room, footsteps passed by. More staff members who might have heard Malloy's story, who might already have formed their opinions about her based on his lies. The ringtone continued to ring as Ariel silently prayed for her husband to pick up. She needed him here, needed someone to witness what was happening, to help her fight back against this false narrative before it became accepted as truth. Her other hand protectively cradled her belly, feeling another contraction building. Her baby would be born into this world of prejudice and assumptions, where even a mother in desperate need of help could be painted as aggressive and entitled simply because of her race. The ringtone suddenly cut off as Jordan Thompson came through the speaker. Ariel's hand shook harder as she prepared to tell him everything. The triage room door burst open as Jordan Thompson rushed in, still wearing his formal speech attire, his tie loose and askew, his eyes widened at the sight of Ariel connected to monitors, her face drawn with exhaustion and tear-streaked. What happened? He crossed the room in 2 quick strides, taking her hand. Ariel's composure cracked as she gripped his hand. Jordan, they wouldn't let me in. The guard blocked me from getting help. I was having contractions. My water broke right there in the lobby, and he just stood there. Jordan's expression darkened as Ariel recounted everything: Malloy's dismissive treatment, his accusations, and now the false report he was spreading through the hospital. His jaw clenched tighter with each detail. And now, they're out there talking about me like I'm some angry black woman who was trying to cause trouble. Ariel's voice broke. They're believing his lies without even questioning them. This ends now. Jordan pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. Within minutes, the hospital administrator on call and the night supervisor appeared in the doorway, their faces masks of professional concern. Mayor Thompson, the administrator, Dr. Phillips, stepped forward. We understand there was some confusion during Mrs. Thompson's admissions process. Confusion? Jordan's voice was controlled but carried an edge that made both administrators straighten. My wife was in active labor, clearly in distress, and your security staff denied her emergency medical care? That's not confusion, that's negligence. The supervisor, a thin woman named Miss Walsh, cleared her throat. According to the security report, Mrs. Thompson was confrontational and refused to follow standard admissions protocols. That's a lie, Ariel interjected, her heart rate monitor beeping faster. I was begging for help. I could barely stand. Mrs. Thompson, please try to stay calm, Dr. Phillips said smoothly. We understand you were under stress, but our security staff are trained professionals who follow strict protocols. I don't care about your protocols, Jordan cut in. I care about the fact that my wife could have given birth in your lobby because your guard decided to profile her instead of help her.